Michelle?
Daniel, OG Rose, and today we're going to be talking about a recent conversation that Michelle had with Cadell Last. It was very enjoyable. So they recently had a conversation on the OG Rose Anchor podcast.
Yeah, I was really delighted and honored to get to talk with Cadell about Hegel's Sublation in real life, specifically as it relates to relationships and libido and intimacy, things like that.
Right.
And so it was great because sublation is a big topic, or it's a big concept in Hegel's work, and yet, like, what does that actually look like in actual lived experience? And so it was a wonderful, wonderful time to talk with Cadell, and I learned a lot from our conversation. And I think the big question that I think we were working around, or one of the questions we were working around in the talk, was sort of like why is it that some people are able to, in the midst of their crisis or pain, go through a type of sublational process and other people just get stuck, and I'm sure everybody can relate to both at some point, we've everyone gets kind of stuck at some points, but the hope is to still be able to not stay stuck, right? But there does seem to be this strange, there's this. I mean, it's definitely like a question that it has to do with how people face negativity, and it's strange that some people are able to face negativity and basically have a sublational process, and some people do not, or seemingly do not, but
this is the question of why people respond to negativity differently, and some sublate it, while for others it becomes an effacement. That's the distinction that we make. That's a massive question. So for example, somebody says you'll never be a successful artist. Some people reply to that going, F you, I will be. And they become successful artists and work really hard. And other people go, you're right. And they stop trying.
Exactly.
Why?
Exactly.
If the answer to this question is genetics, or it's just personality, then we might be doomed. Because there's nothing, because if indeed, if you buy the premise, now I'm not saying you have to, but if you buy the premise of, say, the meta crisis, or the need to solve what Forrest Landry will call the human coordination problem, or if you'll say humans have to be prepared for the pathology of the singularity that's coming, there's the difficulty of facing AI, or we have to somehow figure out how to coordinate across great diversity. Well, all of that means facing negativity. And a lot of people will respond to that negativity either by saying, well, destroy all AI, which that probably won't work. That's like burning all the printing presses, or, the Luddites destroying some of the technological advancements to save their jobs. If you respond to sort of the meta crisis and shrinking economics and people losing their jobs with, say, storming Washington, that's probably not going to work. So all of these are going to create what's probably coming is a whole lot of negativity that people are going to have to face. Now, obviously the conversation you had with Cadell is on an individual level, and that's where you need to start. I think the conversation has to start there. But the reason why the conversation, I think, is so important is because it's pointing to the larger macro question of how people will respond to negativity. And indeed, if it's just simply genetic, or it's just personality, and it's not in people's control, then we might be in big trouble. Because if these big coordination problems require the majority of people on planet Earth, well, it's not going to do simply to have a minority of people or just some people. It's hard to put numbers on these things. And to me, the focus on the question of response to negativity is kind of the correct focus. There's a lot of talk about becoming more rational, like in rational communities. There will be notions of developing personality or consciousness. These kind of things. And I don't want to say that there's no truth in any of those efforts, but basically the reasons why those efforts might be important is because they help people face negativity. So for example, if you're talking something like, Wilbur's stuff, there's an idea of having the personality that can handle paradox, right? Or to see the value of both the conservative and liberal point of view. Well, that's facing negativity. It's uncomfortable to think about difference, right? It's uncomfortable to think about how things go together, because it's not self-evident. And in doing that, you don't fit neatly into a socio-political box, or you're going to be rejected. So there's negativity there. But if you emphasize, say, the evolving personality or the elevated consciousness, you're really not putting your finger on, to me, what is the critical question of facing negativity, which then would be, of course, facing the real and the con. And if you don't prioritize that, you just say, what do we need to do to evolve personality or consciousness? And you're going to say, oh, be more loving, be more humble, be more empathetic, be more open. Well, that's all well and good, but basically everyone is until they face negativity. Like, who isn't generally pretty loving, pretty kind, pretty open until they face negativity, and then suddenly they're not. And then basically everyone gets surprised by the response they tend to have to negativity once it occurs, says in a crisis or an emergence of the real. So to me, this question of facing negativity is just such a big deal, and it's very mysterious. There's ways in which it's very, very mysterious, and it's very strange. Like, why do people respond in different ways like they do?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I mean, I think there is this kind of, it, like, the fact that it is mysterious and uncertain is probably just, something to live with, right? Like,
sure,
the question is there, right? And it's like kind of like the kind of the encouragement from Rilke to live with the question, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that. At the same time, though, there is a way in which to understand it better is, like, there's something about understanding it better that then would be helpful, because then, you could potentially encourage it.
Sure.
Right? Like, and I think, it's funny, actually, living with the question I think people who are, what does living with the question mean? It means to embrace uncertainty.
Yes.
I think that people who can live with the question are typically people who are a bit more, basically negativity is always going to bring about uncertainty.
Yes.
And you always remember that there's
yes.
more to come.
Yes.
Like, it's never gonna, just stop, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you get to the place where you can talk about living with the question, you probably don't need to worry about this question.
Right. But it's kind of like, so it's just sort of like, just to relate those ideas of uncertainty and how that seems to be something about it, where, like, people who can live with uncertainty
yes.
are usually people who are able to do sublation during, when facing negativity.
Yeah.
Now, like,
which then begs the question, why can some people live with uncertainty versus others?
Yeah. Well, I think I do. Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, exactly. That I think that there is something about the fact that people have, there's something about people are just inclined to sort of like have one response or another, but it's like everybody's capable of all of the responses. So
sure.
Everybody actually is. There's like an equal possibility for everybody to do, like all the, like, let's just take, here's your 4 options. Everybody has those 4 options before them.
Sure.
But what is it that, like, for some people, they literally don't see 3 of those options, right? They just kind of, like in the talk I talk with Cadell, like, some people don't even realize that they could actually do something differently than what they're doing, right? Yes. That's why creativity is really important, because yes. you start to say, you get creative with like, just even having the ability to say something about the creative impulse or whatever is to say, what if we do it differently,
Yes.
I do have a sense of, like, and I talked about it in the talk with Cadell, this idea of, like, the self-affirmation. I mean, I think there's something about, there's like a funny safety that you have to kind of feel within yourself to have like these risks of facing negativity, because every risk is going to, facing of a negativity is a type of risk, or you feel it as a risk or something. And because it might be risking your identity, it might be
sure.
it's definitely risking your certainty, all of these
sure.
things, right?
Sure.
So the safety within yourself, I think, is a big part of it.
Sure.
Like, and I didn't really quite phrase it in that way when talking to Cadell, but that's kind of what I think is interesting about this, is actually, like, it's like this. Okay, think about, like, a stable, safe self that is much more able to kind of, like, move through different,
yeah.
like, it's able to move through things. But like when all the movement is actually contained within this a self, which is unstable, not safe. There's like this kind of instability there. That's where like that now all of the, now when it's like it's almost just way too much when you get the movement of moving through negativity. It's
there's something here where your ability to handle uncertainty is correlated with your confidence in self.
Yeah, exactly.
You have enough stability, like it's not too much instability. Whereas if you're internally unstable, you need a stable environment, right? Because otherwise it'd be too much.
Yeah.
But if you're internally stable,
yes,
well, then you can handle a environment that is less stable, right? So then the question becomes the following: why are some people more internally stable than others? What brings that about?
Right. I mean, and I think like yes, and I think that's all of that's kind of tracking on a potential for this answering this question or considering the answer to such a question. And I mean, I can't help but think like that there's something about childhood that has to do with this.
It probably very often it does.
Because the thing is like, and I know that's because in the talk Cadell and I are talking about like the comparison being talked about are people from the same family. Like often
sure.
this is where it really shows itself. So
well, that's why the example's so good though.
Yeah, it's but what's so confusing though, right? It's
yes.
most confusing because you have people who are raised in the exact same household,
yes.
and
same in stimuli.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And then like you just get like totally different responses to
yes.
negativity.
Yes.
But
so then is it genetic, of course?
Well, yeah, is it genetic, right? Exactly, maybe. But I tend to like lean toward the epigenetic side of things.
Sure. And most genetics, the old understanding of genetics is solid is not held by most people now.
Right, exactly. But I think I want to say like, okay, for example, I'm thinking of two people that I know from years ago. Sure. Anyways, and they are raised in the same household.
Sure.
Now, so that household had some instability in it between the parents who were ended up not being together. So those two people though had there was a unique relationship that they had with the father, and also if you were to look at the mother relationship, and those like the person who had a strong relationship with the father is much like this person was able to handle negativities and like always instead of be bitter better, like it's like that idea of like anytime you have hardship, it's like you either have two choices, you can be bitter or better,
right?
They seemingly chose better, essentially. The other I'm not saying like that they necessarily are bitter. I don't know what they feel or think, but they seem to have certain, whether you want to say mental health concerns or pretty much. And so long story short, it's like to me, I just think a lot of it may have to do with relationship to the parents.
Well, we know, a few things. We know that there are...
And that's like one case out of like billions of human beings. But there does seem to be something there.
Well, we know that the studies on broken families are basically undeniable.
Yeah.
On the negative impact. Like, you can say that doesn't... the argument basically is that conservatives and liberals, if we just use those camps, have different... they have a different sense of what the response should be to that information about the breakdown of the family. But the effects of the breakdown of the family are pretty indisputable. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't actually know of anyone who seriously disputes them. They just argue about the causes or the responses, okay? So, there's a very, very good evidence to show that family matters.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of families that stay together that the people in those families never develop an ability to respond to negativity well. Right. There's plenty of families that don't say have a divorce. You can say, well, maybe the parents don't get along, but then it becomes difficult to tell, right? Like most of our data that shows the importance of family is based on comparing families that stay together, single mothers, divorce, and so on and so forth. It's very difficult to, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I just don't know of it. I think it's difficult to get qualitative data versus quantitative data. But it could be something where there's some sort of characteristic of the parents that have an impact, or a particular relation, like you're in the same household, but if there are different relations, say one has a stronger relation to the dad, like you're saying, than the other, then that could have a negative. That could be a big deal, right? So there's that. And I just wanted to add before I forget, at the end of the day, you can say this is a mystery, right?
Yeah.
But you see, the danger of that is kind of like in theology, we say, well, God's a mystery, and so you don't conceptually mediate, and then you're also like the intuitionist in Hegel, where you just say, well, it's a mystery, and you don't conceptually mediate it, and then there are like problems because of that. So I think it's worth conceptually mediating. At the end of the day, it sometimes happens and sometimes doesn't.
Sure.
But if you could get a finger on why, or what are things that can be done to help with it, then that could go a long way. I do always wonder. I always find it mysterious. Not mysterious, but it's seemingly like, why has Plato put so much frickin' gymnastics and sports and fighting and like training in the Republic? Like, I can't help but think sports play a role here. And I don't want to say it just has to be sports, but I do wonder if there's something about doing something in your life where you can get like your knees dirty or something, like, and you're put in an environment where you can fail or get beaten. Like, it seems important to be like in environments where you can get beaten and used to getting beaten, as opposed to never getting beaten and the only time you fail is like in college, where the consequences are too dire and you can't learn from that failure. So that's one thing I think about sometimes.
Well, yeah, I think there's something to that now, like.
But there's lots of people who do sports where they don't respond to negativity well. So I'm not saying it's a cure-all.
Right, and you can also take, like, obviously you don't mean this by beaten, but like, like some horrible extreme is like.
Sure, but that would be personal, so that would be, like if your dad beat you or something. Like, it wouldn't be in sports where you lost. Like, there's something that happens in sports where you can lose, but it's not personal. It's just the game.
Exactly, yeah. And also, like, being beaten is just, you lose, but you kind of accept that you understand when you do this sport. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose, and that's just how it goes, right? Like you're saying, it's not personal.
But there's even some about the language, like in sports, where you get used to talking about beaten or loss or I got knocked out. That actually has you kind of get used to the negative language. That's almost good.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, where like it's almost like the safe space to lose, right? You can lose, and that's actually very inevitable.
And get used to the realities.
You get used to the fact that, like, your team lost.
Yes.
But then you also, you keep trying to win. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yes. I think that's probably there's something to that. I think that's probably, there's probably something to that, definitely.
Yeah, and just like you get, like, even, like, in today's culture, even the language of, like, oh, we got beaten. Like, there's, like, a knee-jerk to the term, like, beaten, which in some respects is good, but in other ways is bad because you're fragile. Where sports kind of treats you to, like, get used to, this is a world where, like, stuff like that happens. Like, people get beaten, they lose, and of course that can get very extreme, but even just knowing that extreme reality exists then helps you think it. And it's there, and you're like, well, I don't want to be like someone who does that, right? Like, it's almost like so much of Lacan, like, warns that if you don't take seriously the reality of the real, then one day it pops up on you, and then you have a pathological response. Whereas if you know about it, and you know that it's there, then it doesn't cause a pathological response, because that would be a response to negativity that's bad, right? Like, a lot of people's response, the other, in the talk you mentioned, there's a lot of the notion of the response to negativity being kind of like hopelessness or becoming, nihilistic. Yeah. But another response to negativity that's bad is the aggressive male, like, what's called toxic masculinity, right? All that is a very bad response to negativity that's kind of trying to posit itself as the right response to negativity, right? So there's an aggressive response to negativity that's also really, really bad. Yeah. And that can happen where people just don't acknowledge the real, and then one day it shows up and they either have like a hopeless response or they have like a really, really aggressive response.
No, it's I mean, it's funny because as we're talking, I'm just kind of like, it's funny too though, because even how we would respond to this question are also probably tied to the things that we feel like shaped us.
Oh, well, what can you do?
Right. I know, like, for you, sport, that was a big part of your development. For me, I think about, like, I have an identical twin sister. Like, there's something about, like, these very close relations that to me felt like so nourishing to the point that I felt very kind of secure to step out. It's kind of like, you know, you read this a lot with children where like when you, and it's a lot like attachment parenting and all of that, where it's like they feel this sense of security that they actually are very, very comfortable to try new things because they have that security of self because they've had that sense of proper attachment, healthy attachment.
Oh yeah, I think that's well documented.
That is supposed to be between parents and children in terms of like just, you know, a healthy relationship.
Yes.
So then they feel confident in themselves to be able to go and do new things and do that.
Yes.
So it's just funny because like that's probably going to shape sort of our, at least our attempts to answer the question.
Of course.
But I think that, and that, like you said, that's kind of all you can really do. You know, because but I think that there is something about this ability to, because like, okay, taking our both examples, like sports, right? This area where you can understand that people win and lose, that you can be beaten, that you'll have to try harder.
Sure.
All of that. Like that's a really good avenue for being like really being able to say, like, I can do this. Like being able to say, I can do this. I might like fall along the way, but I will get back up, right?
Sure.
And I think that's kind of like, for me, I relate to that a lot in terms of like that sort of, you know, whether you want to call it a parental or familial or, you know, even friends that can sort of like support you to basically be that voice for you, right? To say when you don't feel that about yourself, to say, you know, it's okay, get back up, you can keep going, right? And but that internalization of that voice for you to say to yourself is a really important step, right?
Yes.
Because, you know, I think even though both our examples have something to bring to the table, I think the sports one to me is like, there's probably something a bit extra in terms of like toward facing negativity such a thing does, because now you are the voice saying it to yourself. Not everybody will always be there to say, hey, get up, you can keep going, you know.
And it probably depends on the sport. Like, you know, wrestling is you are the only person on the mat. Like in team sports, it's probably less. You know, and it's very tempting in team sports to say, well, John didn't catch the pass or he didn't block. Like, there can be more of a...
blaming.
And maybe that's starting to get at it. Maybe there's something about responsibility. Maybe it's responsibility is more critical here.
Oh, yeah. That's good. I like that. Well, see, okay, that's good. That's really good because I think responsibility, like, for example... that word, I always think about the fact that it has responding.
Yeah, how you
right?
respond.
How you respond. How do you respond, right? And that's what we're talking about. How do you respond to
how do you
activity?
respond, right.
And that's why I think, like, you know, again, just to quickly tie it back to this whole idea of, like, security in your familial situation or whatever, your relationships, a lot of times it's because, you know, somebody responded to you.
Yeah.
You weren't ignored. You weren't, like, you know, you weren't... And this can sometimes be, like, well, wouldn't that just feed you, like, constantly kind of getting what you want? No, it's not about that. It's about just literally having a human connection, you know?
Yeah, and it's funny, too, because as you're talking, like, responsibility is like the ability to respond.
That's
like,
what I'm saying.
And you're given ability because someone responded to you.
I love that word, like responsibility.
Yeah.
Responsibility, you know? So it's your ability to respond also has a lot to do with the fact that, you know, you can rely upon responses yourself. Like that somehow the response, you see the power in the response.
It does seem to have a lot to do with relations, but also I want to say toughness. Like, but it's interesting because, like, toughness autonomously leads to, like, jerks. You know, toughness as its own value is problematic. But then, of course...
relational route can lead to codependency.
Yeah, and lead to, like, you know, when you have such strong relationships, and you see this in families, and then the kids try to individuate, there can be a lot of trouble that happens, right? So there's a ditch on either side of it. So there's something interesting about toughness plus deep relation that then brings out the good of the toughness and brings out the good of the relations. Yeah. So there's something interesting there. Because, like... I'm always very curious by how many people that are good at responding to negativity, I want to say have mentors. I want to say they have older men in their life, older women in their life, an adult that cares. That's not mere like a relationship that's also like a cultivating relationship, which can be family, but very often it seems almost to be additional to family, or an older member of your family that doesn't, like, your immediate family is going to be in the house, but let's say a grandparent who chooses to spend time with you and likes you doesn't feel like they necessarily have to relate to you. I'm very interested in the non-necessary relationship that, because it feels chosen, feels like you're like, oh wow, this person chooses to be with me, and that seems to have some sort of important validation function, and then it's wisdom bestowing.
Yeah, no,
and it gives you like they tell you the stories of how they grew up, and that gives you perspective.
Right, and also like often grandparents are like they'll have like war stories and
like mine did. That was a big deal.
And that's a big deal because
the fact that my grandfather went off to on the Iowa during World War II, that's like, oh my gosh, could I do that? I should be able to do that. You're like, I better be able to do that.
Right.
To live up to the name. There's in a good way.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah. No, I think that's all really really good here. And I think that this ability to say like because the thing is, families, like, if you have a positive experience and you're like, it's great. You can be, you can have the security of self and then you can step out and be confident. Well, the risk is that you get reliant on that, though. Then you don't actually step out when you need to sometimes. Exactly. But also, like, some people have crappy family lives, unfortunately. A lot of people. It's very dysfunctional. It's very painful, traumatic.
Yes.
So it's like, you can't just, that's obviously not a reliable source. And often, like we're saying, that can cause the person to not be able to ever face negativity.
That's right.
In a way that actually sublates it. So it's not merely just, there's never going to be some sort of like, unicorn rainbow option here.
And that wouldn't help someone who's 25 now.
Right, exactly. It's kind of like, well, okay, great.
Right, yeah, right.
But I do think there's this ability to like have this chosenness, this sense of like belonging, which you explore a lot in belonging again, which is really important. Which I thought is so important. That idea of like making a choice, how that like relates to like feeling chosen, and we want to feel chosen, and all of that. And I think like like you're saying, having somebody who chooses, to give you time or their time and attention in what they share, in how they spend the afternoon or whatever.
Sure.
Like that does matter a lot, because when you see them choose you, then you feel more confident to choose yourself, right? Like in a strange, in a way, like you kind of, because you parallel a lot of times, like just on a very primal level, you often mirror what people do. So then you say, oh, okay, well, they're willing to put time into me, I should put some time into me too. Which means put time into me is not, like the rabble of like what we talk, Cadell and I got into, like it's not like last man type of stuff.
Sure.
It's put time into me as in do something instructive with myself.
Yeah, there's something.
You know what I mean?
So a few things. One, certainly parents can make their children feel chosen, but I wonder if like it's almost there's almost a handicap here, because the parent would have to act in such a manner that convinces the child that the parent is going beyond necessity.
Yeah.
Like, because the parent has to relate to you, and so there has to be a certain level of connection that convinces the child, oh, they're doing more than they have to, therefore I'm chosen. Yeah. Whereas if you have an external person, like a Mr. Dillard or a grandparent, like it's almost like from the get-go it has to be more chosen. You see what I'm saying? Like the character of the relationship is easier to convince you that it is chosen. And therefore that you, in a sense, are chosen. So it can happen with the parent, but I wonder if there's a kind of handicap there.
Yeah, that's interesting. It actually, like, I can't help but think about the fact that, like, I think something that it was potentially helpful in religion was this idea that, like if we take the Christian framework, there's this idea that, like, and yes, like, there can be some pitfalls to this language, but just, go with me for a second. There's this idea that, like, God didn't have to, but he chose you.
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
You're not actually a God figure, or like, sorry, you're not like of the God blood, but you're chosen, and you're adopted. Now you get to have God blood, and it's like this interesting kind of like you're adopted to be an heir to the Most High,
and you should be worthy of it.
And you should be worthy of it, and also like this is an element of God didn't have to, but he did, and you are chosen, and so because I think there's something in, like you're getting at that is really important about this. But I'm just thinking to myself, perhaps this is something that like religion would have provided if people didn't get it from their community or because we are getting less and less like where elders speak to younger people at all of this simply because unfortunately people are often like tucked away elderly can be, and youth are just in school, and then but so it's like that. This is really like, to me, I'm like, oh, what came to mind was religion, really.
If someone wanted to do a very fascinating project, they would examine every religion as a unique psychotechnology and see how every religion like has different psychological, I want to call them psychotechnologies, or like resources. Yeah. Christianity definitely has a certain psychotechnology in mixing, you're a sinner, but you're also chosen, which is this very, obviously I'm biased, but like a fascinating psychotechnology. Because you're simultaneously saying, hey, don't get so high on yourself, and then at the same time saying, and yet God loves you so much he died for you. Oh, and death sucks, by the way. And there's like, take up your cross. Like, if you go through the psychotechnologies of Christianity, they're pretty fascinating. Now, of course, the danger of chosen election and all that language, all of that is you then get nationalism, or we're the chosen people, we're better than other people.
Sure.
But of course, the whole idea of Jesus is there's like, but you must never forget you're at the same time a sinner, right? Like, if that gets out of balance, there's trouble.
Right. And there can also be this kind of like,
I don't have to do anything because I'm already chosen and saved.
Exactly. Or the idea of like, you're lucky I chose you. This kind of
arbitrariness.
Yeah. Well, kind of a spirit of like, where it's kind of hung over, it depends on one's relation, in their own development of like how they encounter God, right? Or how they know like what their concepts of God are.
Yes.
Or, are they always feeling like the wrath and the judgment and the shame, in the sense of like, you're lucky you're getting chosen, you really should be in like, so it's like all of that's going to really, really impact what I'm talking about. But if there's a sense in which, because, okay, for children, a lot of times, too, their notions of the world, they're really getting from, like, the first others, which are the parents, right? Yes. So for them, they see whatever they're going to kind of, like, possibly learn or come to understand, even in their own self, of, like, nature, the universe, God, something bigger, something higher, is always going to be, like, in their manifest experiences with their closest relationships.
Yes.
So a lot of times, perhaps, like, just for example, they might relate how they have the relationship with their mother and father to how they relate to God, right?
Absolutely.
Even though they don't they know they're not the same, but they still kind of transfer.
How can you not?
Yeah, exactly. So, I guess for me, like, I was thinking about, like, just from a personal example, I didn't really have like older people in my life who I would spend a lot of time with, but I had grandparents, I had older people who I'd relate to through the community or church or whatever, but like just the fact, I don't know if it's just sort of an awareness of my parents and what they did for me and what they did for my family, like, for my nuclear family too, there's a whole lot to it, but like also the fact that they would be like kind and nice even when they were tired and stuff like that. I don't know why, but even when I was younger, I realized like that was something that they didn't have to, but they chose to be kind, and be loving and all of that. And I guess that was enough for me to like sort of realize that to have this feeling of being chosen, even though they were my parents, and like, yes, there's kind of in a sense obligated to, but they did, but it's almost like they are obligated to, but they could really just be mean, but they're not.
So there's something here. There's something here about being convinced or coming to truly believe that things don't have to be the way that they are. Like that they can be alternative.
Yeah.
And if you believe they can be alternative, either because, let's say, if you believe in God, definitely, if you go, at least for me, if you're told all the time, anything is possible, God can do anything, God can redeem any situation, miracles, all this different stuff, then, oh, well, frick, yeah, I can do it. You're like, what can you not do? So there's no hopelessness.
And that is a very interesting way to think of it as a psychotechnology.
It is a psychotechnology. And, well, what we're finding out is, you had all these people say the notion of God is ridiculous, so they kicked out religion, not realizing it was a massively important psychotechnology for societies. And now you have a mental health crisis. Now you have all these massive ways of having to navigate negativity, and you have no psychotechnology by which to do it. You say, well, we got counseling, we got psychology, and different. Yeah, religion was way more advanced. Like, way more advanced. Of course it was, because it was thousands upon thousands of years older. It had more experience.
Right.
But it's a psychotechnology.
Right. And you could say, like, okay, well, for the good of the psychotechnology, it has just enough bad, so maybe it's, like, not the ultimate psychotechnology. That's possible. That's possible.
But you at least have to acknowledge it was a psychotechnology to replace it. If you're going to get rid of it, you have to replace it.
Yeah. Because the thing is, ultimately, we still have to derive a psychotechnology to cope
with the
negativity that is going to be in life,
That's right.
And I think and whether that's, you find somebody who you admire or you who inspires you, these are all types of psychotechnology, which then help you to be like, okay, I'm not going to give up, or I'm gonna defy the odds.
Well, if the two, so we talked about responsibility in this sense of alternative.
Yeah.
So for example, your parents could have treated you bad.
Yeah.
So there was an alternative reality that could have been the case. It wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Likewise, like you could have been sent off to World War II.
Yeah.
You were not when you were 18.
Yeah.
Things could have been different. So this kind of real profound sense of possibility.
Yeah, and that's why I think this is such a great point, like a really, really good point you're making of this idea of like this. It didn't necessarily have to be this way, and like somehow realizing that it could have been different. I want to say there's also like that also screams gratitude to me, but like there's also this idea of like the fact that you realize that things could be, that they can always be different. And it's like this. It's interesting. This kind of reminds me of this passage that Rivera shared on like Buber and Don Quixote. Like he had shared this in stories about like this concept of danger, where it's actually more about this like mode of realizing that there's always this potential. Like there's at every moment could be a spark. And that's kind of, this is not talking about like, doing like dirt biking necessarily or doing like dangerous activities. What it means is a mode of living with uncertainty and realizing that things could be different, and you can make things different. And that's huge, because making things different, then when you realize, oh my gosh, I could make things different. So then when Cadell's saying like people, when he's in middle school and people are making fun of him, he can be like, well, I'm going to make things different. Like, you just wait, because I can. Yes. But you this really radical embracing of making things different, things could be different, change. See, it's also, so we forget that change is like, because we talk about this we talked about this in the talk about like this regression to the maternal, the womb, sort of like the return to the womb. Thing is that change is part of life. It is life, and the more that we embrace change, the more they think that we can be in this place of we can make a change, and like
that's right.
And so it's like just one more thing really quick. It's just interesting because a lot of times the very thing that seems most scary is the asset. Like, it is the place of like of fixing, like of being able to be the redemption or something like that.
No, that's exactly right. So there's something here on the realizing that things can be alternative, that then if they're not alternative, you're responsible. Like, if they can be alternative, then the way that things are is your responsibility.
But that's scary. Yeah, like
So then there's two, because
let's just leave it deterministically then.
Yeah, I think there isn't there. I think that because it's interesting. So, there's a lot of talk in culture of you can be anyone you want to be, you can do anything you want to do. There's a whole lot of like possibility talk, and yet it's empty, right? There's a kind of emptiness to it. But because maybe it's not matched up with responsibility enough. And, when you match up alternative, because people don't want to say, you can be anyone you want to be, but they don't tend to add to it. And if you're not, it's your fault. And for me, I definitely thought that. Like, I definitely had a thought of, life can be lots of different ways. And the way that life ends up will to some degree be your responsibility. Maybe not entirely, but in my head, the longer the time scale, the more it would probably reflect me than not. Like, the way I thought about it is, who I am when I'm 20 is probably less my fault than who I am at 30, who I am at 40, who I am at 50, who I'm at 60, who I'm at 70. And the longer the time scale, the higher the probability you probably had more influence than less. Well, I don't want to be 70 and be like crap. I feel like the older you get, like you can do more. And so then if you don't do more, you're more responsible. So what are you doing today to be ready for that coming future? Like, I thought about it like, who are you going to be when you're 50, like 60, 70, and like you'll be more responsible for that.
Well, yeah, and that's great, and that's very true, and that speaks to also what Cadell brought up in the talk, like his whole 80 years, 80-year-old Cadell, and I thought that was so wonderful. This idea of like thinking about like, well, wait a second, how does this impact like my life or like my future when I'm older? Exactly, and I think like. I think this though, like, it's funny because there can feel like this sense of, oh my gosh, if I haven't really been as mindful as I should about that, everything's over. But here's the deal: the people who I think can face negativity understand that they can, as Cadell, the language he uses is flip the script. Even the mistakes they've made, even the things that like them. You can flip them. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily like going to be easy, or that it's that means the mistake was like was okay to make or something. No, but it's like you have to get over the fear, because there's a lot of fears that keep people from change and from making the most of themselves or whatever, like going after their dreams and working hard at it and all of that, because there's a sort of the sense of well crap, like there's just there's no possibility because I've whether I've already messed up but the thing is you basically, like something I said in the talk was this ability to make mistakes actually, and not be so caught up on that, because if you got caught up on that, you're over. You're over. Instead of just saying, I will make mistakes. I'm not going to intentionally try to make mistakes, but that might happen. But I will not stop. Basically, I will get back up. I will flip the script. I will make something good, like I will make something out of that misery or whatever it is that mistake could have caused. You know what I mean?
Yes. Now, I do think the longer you take to flip the script, it probably is harder to flip the script because you get more entangled. So there are consequences for delay.
Sure.
I definitely thought that. That's one of the reasons I wasn't going to delay.
Yeah, I'm just saying though, like for somebody, like I think what happens is that, you're saying like when you have the kind of I want to say the foresight, right? You're like, well, yeah, that's what I thought about, so I'm not going to do it. But I think that there's this sort of strange thing that can happen where people either believe a narrative about themselves of failure, or they have made a failure or something, and they feel like, well, because I didn't have the foresight before, it's over.
Well, of course, but the issue is you have to develop an alternative strategy. There's no determinism. There's just strategies.
Yeah.
Like if you're 35 and you have gotten entangled in a job you don't like, in situations you're not like, well, if tomorrow you just say, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to not talk to any of the friends I've had or whatever, that's not going to work. You're not going to be able to pay for your bills. But you could say, okay, over 5 years, I will gradually move in the direction to get out of those entanglements and go in the direction I want to go. So, so the issue is people tend to flip between determinism. Like basically everyone's natural response to an unfortunate circumstance is determinism. Like some form of determinism. That's not the correct response. Yeah. The response should be a fitting strategy. Yeah. Okay, if you've spent 20 years if you've always wanted to be a writer and for 20 years you never did it because your mom said it would be a waste of time, then at 20 you're not going to be able to write as well as had you been working on it for, the last 15 years. Right. However, if you were to start at 20 and create a strategy where you say, well, I shouldn't expect to have a novel published before I'm 40. Well, that's fine. Like, had you started earlier, maybe you could have done it by when you were 29 or something. But who cares? Publishing a novel at 40 or 20, if it's an excellent, fantastic novel, what does it matter? You just change your horizon. Basically, the determinant, I think we've talked about this before, there's so much determinism in our society and hopelessness because you're made to feel that if you don't succeed by 29, you failed. And by the time you get out of college, right? When you have this whole expanse of the middle years that makes so much possible. Yeah. And sure, you didn't start something until you were 25, but if you take seriously the middle years, you just create a strategy accordingly. Yeah. And then you think compoundly, and you can do a lot. Yeah. But to stick, on this question of, so there's something to be about realizing it can be different. Right. And responsibility for how things are. That seemed part of the equation. But then there seems to be some people who realize that in a manner where they go, oh, therefore I need to develop the wisdom or meet people to help me navigate this alternative to figure out how to do it, because the strategy by which to realize the life I want to live, like a good life, is not self-evident. Because that's something for me that was big. It's like one of the reasons you start reading philosophy or talking with older people, it's like, life can go a whole lot of different ways. I'm responsible for it, and it is not at all self-evident what makes a good life. Yeah, yeah. It's not clear at all. And so then you start thinking, and then also you're like, and it seems to really matter who you hang out with. It seems to really matter how you use your free time. You start it's almost like it's like realizing anything can be alternative, you're responsible, and then having a strategic way of thinking about it, as opposed to a kind of not strategic way about it where you just kind of say anything's possible, yay, and I'm responsible for what I do, but it's not strategic. It's just very fluffy.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, I thought you were going to say this when you said the quote of you could be anything you want to be, and then you added and if you're not, it's your fault or something.
Yeah.
Well, there's that, but there's also like the fact, and that's true,
Sure.
and like nobody says that part. If nobody wants to
no one wants to feel the negativity.
The negativity of that, right?
The negativity.
But there's also this way it's like, you can be anything you want to be. It's just going to take a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's like,
but that's negativity too. That's funny. Yeah.
So I think that's the big thing too, where it's just like, and that's something I felt like kept ringing true to the like in and through the talk with Cadell, was like this ability to do hard work, this ability to work hard at something, and I think like there's just this we just have a very strange way of thinking about work, merely for like, because you were assigned something, or it's for school, or it's for work.
Yeah, it's not work,
like,
if it's not in the system.
No, if it's not in the system, it's literally not work. It must just be it's just your hobby, or it's just your interest.
Or you're stupid. Like, why are you doing this? Like, there's like, literally, you're stupid.
Just crazy. Like, you're crazy.
Yeah, you're stupid.
Stupid.
You're
or
irrational.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just, to me, it's like, it's quite crazy, because I mean, I guess I'm pretty used to like,
Sure.
knowing people who think of work of just doing it intrinsically, like where you're just, because you just want to work at it.
Yes.
But I forget that like actually a lot of people don't think that about it that way, which is fine. I'm not judging that. I'm just saying that is the norm, is to think work is school and what you get paid for. Everything else is
shouldn't be work. It's like an ethic.
Yeah. And it's like, oh my, well that then.
Then you're doomed.
Well, the thing is, like,
you can't compound. Game's over.
To the point about things could be different. How are you ever going to do things differently?
They can't be different under that setting.
How could you ever do things differently?
You're on a track. By definition, it can't be different. You're like in a
system that, but what if you want to just innovate?
You can't. A system exists to stop innovation. Innovation is a threat to the system.
That's true. I guess the system is there so that you can keep the system can be perpetuated, right?
True deep innovation is completely anti-system. Systems hate that. Like, they don't want anything to do with it. That's called disruption. And as much as like, no, capitalism loves disruption. No, sure, capitalism does. Corporations do not like it. It destroys them. Like, you think Google just had a code red the other day because of OpenAI. They've never, like, it's been a long time since they've had a, like, we're doomed letter. So you think they like that? No. But
sorry,
please,
really quick. Sorry, I didn't interrupt you. But it's kind of funny, right? Because like, and I don't, bash on this, because I see the point in it. I think there's some very good things that come from it. But like, let's just take the structure of school, right? It's been kind of a lot of years of it just being pretty much the same.
Since
it's like there's just not, and that's why it just makes me wonder, like, it's like, well, this is working enough, and
yes.
To me it's like, it's weird though, because again, with this whole idea of like off the wall creative ideas of like, well, what if we just tried this? What if it was just like this? What if you did school like, for at least 3 days a week outside in the whatever,
in the forest or whatever.
Just whatever, just pick something, just run something around. I'm not saying you would necessarily be able to do that, and there'd be liability issues and such, but like, it's just interesting because things it's like they get into this sense of, this is what we do, and especially when it has anything to do with bureaucracy and stuff, and it just kind of gets stuck that way for a long time.
Absolutely. And then moralized.
Right. And like the thing is that like we talked about, like the language we talked about at the beginning is like a sublation or stuck.
Basically.
So it's like, what I mean to say is like systems, I guess, seemed like what I'm realizing, not that, there can be good ways in which, when you think of systematic ways to be productive or creative or innovative, you will need rhythms and such.
Sure.
But the thing is that like a system in this sense is basically like, I don't know that the system itself will really teach you to sublate, because it doesn't want to be sublated. That's the whole point of the system being there,
No. There is no value.
Because if it's sublated, it would integrate itself, but it would also kind of evolve in a sense.
The system wants you to respond in very particular ways to negativity to stay in the system.
So it's like, so in that way,
it uses negativity to its advantage.
So in that way too, it's like we are dealing with negativity, but it's just kind of like not radical negativity.
To control you, to herd cattle. Like basically, like
but they'd be like, but we are doing negativity. What do it's kind of like, how could they ever justify that they're like allowing for ultimate negativity?
When somebody tells you, What the system wants is when you want to be like an artist and somebody says art is stupid, the system wants you to respond with, you're right, I'll go get a day job. That's how the system wants you to be trained to respond to negativity. Like everyone, so it's very important to realize everyone does respond to negativity. The question is how they respond to negativity.
And that's kind of like how I said in the talk, like everybody's going to transform.
Yes. Yeah,
you know,
everyone
you're
does.
either going to transform into like one day waking up and being like, who the HE double hockey six am I when you look in the mirror, right? Or you're going to transform into who you want to become, or who you are becoming. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you're going to transform. Doesn't matter, and that's the same with negativity.
Well, I mean, again, a way I thought about it is you will have to be somebody. You have no choice but to be somebody. Who's that going to be?
Right.
Is it going to be someone like a zombie, or is it going to be someone who like adds value, like to people's lives, and not in a utilitarian sense, but in a classical sense of truth, beauty, and goodness, basically. Right. So you're going to have to be someone. Like, who is that going to be? And so no, the system has trained people to respond to negativity in a manner that supports the system. Because that's what it wants. The system wants to be supported. And basically, if you don't think about it, you're going to go in that direction. You're in a river. It has a current. It's pushing you a certain way. Right. And that's why also it's so hard to fight it. Like, that's why responding to negativity in a manner that sublates is so difficult, because you're, by definition, swimming against the current. And if you're swimming against the current, that's harder than swimming with the current. The current is always the system, the zeitgeist. Like, it has to be.
It's kind of funny because the current, and it's like, what's currently happening? You know, it's like, it's in a sense, whatever's kind of current is the current.
Yeah, and if you go against it, you get shocked with an electrical current. Like, you go against the current, so you get shocked.
Yeah.
So sublation is always fighting the current. So here's the thing. If you go, okay, things can be alternative, I'm responsible to it, but then you're not trained in terms of toughness or wisdom. When you feel the shock of swimming against the current, you'll then be like, oh, this must not be the right way. So there's something where when you experience hardship, you have two choices. Interpret this as evidence you shouldn't be doing this, or interpret this as evidence that this is what you're supposed to be doing. So that seems to be the next step of this, is how you interpret hardship, as evidence you're doing the wrong thing or evidence you're doing the right thing. And why would you think it's the right thing if you never had an older gentleman telling you that it was the right thing, or if you never had experiences in sports to think this is the right way?
Yeah, no, that's all good. That's all very good. There's a part of me that, because I have like some crazy squirrely, well, it's a very human tendency to totalize, right?
Sure.
So that the only thing is that like sometimes doing the tough thing could actually fall into, and hear me out, into the self-love category, which I know is kind of like, you know, that term is kind of like a buzz lingo in like the you know, social media world. But the thing is like, okay, doing the tough thing also requires sometimes, I don't know, listening to that still small inner voice, doing things that people don't understand, giving time to the things that, you know, again, exist within you that are trying to be birthed, that will be hard to birth, but you have to give yourself time to do that.
Yes.
And a lot of times, this is kind of like the self-tough love. I'll add that. Let me add that. Self-tough love. But you do have to give yourself some time.
Right.
And a lot... My little squirrely totalizing brain can sometimes be like, I absolutely, like, just to be completely candid, fall into the martyr.
Sure.
Martyr mindset, where it's just like, you just, you know, the tough, this is not a dialectical toughness. This is a, well, I'm just gonna basically, you know, how do I put this? It's like where okay, this is a good example of it. This is a very common thing that people could relate to. People pleasing.
Yeah, absolutely.
People pleasing is a type of, it's strange because you're like, well, you're doing something that's kind of like, basically could potentially burn you out, you know, all of these things. And you're like, but see, I'm doing the tough thing.
Yes.
But what you're not doing is the tough self-love. You're not doing what do they call it? The tough love, right? So it's self-tough love, right? Where there's this sort of sense of like, you both are willing to be tough with yourself, but also love yourself enough that you sometimes say no, or you sometimes say, or you say yes. It's like this, like I bring up in the talk, Nietzsche's sacred no and sacred yes. There's this sort of ability to be able to say yes, say no, mean those things, and also not simply think that like you have to please people in order to to exist, like, or to feel affirmation. Like you suddenly shifted from the feelings. Not that you don't care about people. You can still deeply love people. Have. And still, certainly you'll hopefully do things that will be pleasing ultimately, like a pleasing aroma in a sense to other people. But the emphasis cannot be on, well, ultimately feelings, really. but do you see what I hope I'm getting at this
very
well.
much so. It's a very important point you're making. Just because you're doing something tough does not mean you're doing something right.
Exactly.
And yet, the things that are right tend to be tough.
Yes, exactly.
So there's this strange... So
yeah, that's a very succinct way of putting it.
It's almost... All values have a version of implementing that is actually counterintuitive to the value or destructive in a way.
Counterfeit.
Or counterfeit. The term I was going to use is it's almost like there's a shadow world.
Exactly. And but this is so hard. It's so hard to discern that because the counterfeit is a counterfeit. The whole point is that it looks and pretty much you're like, it's so hard to tell the difference.
There's a whole shadow world.
Exactly.
And it's basically in service of the system of the zeitgeist. And again, Christianity as a psychotechnology always talked about principalities, the world. Now that got confused with matter, but world as a kind of organizing system of thinking. The shadow world, so for example, the system must have a form or a way in it to convince people that they're tough. Because if it didn't, one day people would go, wait a minute, I've never done anything tough. And they may actually start going against the system because they're like, wow, I need to. So the system's like, crap. How do we somehow make people feel like they're tough so that they don't actually look at themselves in the mirror one day and say, am I doing hard things? So what they do is they say, oh, hard work. Or, going to work in capitalism is how you prove that you're tough. And of course, hard work is very important. But there's a shadow world version of hard work, where you're just doing, the Bible talks about toil.
Yes.
Adam had work in the garden, but what is his punishment? Toil, okay? Mm-hmm. So, likewise, people-pleasing, that's another example. And what can also happen if you, never do this kind of sublimation, if one day you go, if you never did the sublimation, you can go, but I'm helping people. So then that's a way of a kind of psychological move where you can feel like you didn't miss out on something because you're serving people.
Exactly.
And this has actually hurt Christianity because people are like, oh, I'm being like Christ if I'm serving people. But actually they just might be people-pleasing.
Exactly.
And there are lots of, that being like Christ is not merely people-pleasing. Jesus does a whole lot more. There are times where he rejects people, and different things. So there's a whole shadow world. Exactly. And this is why... Basically, it seems like the old wisdom, again, I'm saying, there's something, so we've talked about realizing there's an alternative, responsibility, toughness, relations, relations seems to be part of it, but then there is this something like wisdom, this discernment ability that seems to be where the older person somehow plays a role, where the older person's like, hey, by the way, there were times in my life where I thought I was doing the right thing and it was the wrong thing. There is no doubt that Mr. Dillard, the older people, hearing stories of people thinking they were doing the right thing and then it was wrong, or doing something that was good that actually ended up being bad because they didn't pivot at the right time or they didn't switch gears. That was a big deal because it's
you can think you're doing the right thing and it's the wrong thing.
Exactly. But then of course that begs the question, how is it possible to think you're doing the right thing when it's the wrong thing? It must be counterfeits. The world must be full of counterfeits.
Exactly. And the thing is too, if you've been inculcated by that for many, many, many years, decades potentially, it is very difficult to
discern. It's very nuanced.
Well, it's very difficult
fine.
to discern, and it's also to make the jump from the basically the shadow toughness to the toughness in the light. Let's just say that.
We'll use that language because that seems to be good. Shadow toughness versus light toughness, or true toughness, or just shadow toughness versus toughness.
Yeah, sure. To make that leap feels like you're literally doing the opposite.
Yes, that's exactly right.
You literally feel like you're doing the opposite. So you're there's no way that this could be what I should be doing.
Absolutely.
Because this feels so counter. See, that's a funny thing. The counterfeit will make you feel the counterness.
Yes.
Because then when you do the shift, and the weird thing is that That's kind of like, when Jesus says, like, my burden is light, my yoke is easy, because there's something about this that you're like, no, like, it's very strange. It's like this sort of, and maybe light toughness is a funny word, is a good word for it, right? Because don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's going to be that's going to be easy.
But it's a toughness that has a sort of...
There's a lightness to the toughness because you're doing the thing that you...
untangles you, that frees you.
That frees you. Or like, where you fight your demons and stuff. And it's like, there's a light toughness. And
there's a light freedom, there's a light love, there's a love that, so a lot of people have a shadow love that basically is kind of this duty-based, obligation-based, like weighty thing, or people like literally, like lots of people dread like being around loved ones. Like that's like the most miserable time of year is like holidays for people, right? And because like when you're around your loved ones or your family, there's all this drama or different things that come up. And yet they define love as the willingness to put yourself in the middle of that drama. Right? And to suffer the drama. Yeah. And that's like love is to suffer that negativity without sublimating the negativity.
Exactly. See, that's the thing. All these counterfeits, the shadow love, the shadow toughness.
It's a non-sublimated negativity.
It's a type of hardness. So you're like, I must be doing something right.
Yes.
But yet it's actually...
it's negativity without sublimation.
Exactly. And which ultimately is just an effacement, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And so to make the shift, you're kind of like... because all of that's steeped in morality, and like you feel it almost feels immoral to do the countering, right? To counter the counterfeit, to negate the negation.
Nietzsche knew that.
And Nietzsche's a brilliant example. That's why he came up in the talk for between me and Cadell, because I think Nietzsche's a wonderful example.
He knew that doing the right thing required feeling like you were doing the wrong thing. Yes. Yeah,
and there's this sort of like, and see the thing is, if you don't do that, like the inevitability of actually doing, like you think you're doing right but then you end up doing wrong.
That's right.
It's more and more likely the more you stay in the shadow.
And it becomes more cognitively dissonant later on to change because you're so embedded in it. It requires far more cognitive dissonance the moment you're entangled.
But I think this is where like what I'll say, like this idea of this self-tough love and etc. You have to also kind of there's a kind of having to have grace for yourself in a sense where it's like, oh, right, I've kind of been thinking for, X decades that this was the way to do blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
And I'm having to make a massive, massive shift.
Yes.
On top of a lot of times, too, you're making these shifts when you've got a lot of massive new
challenges, obligations, duty, etc.
Like identity shifts and like new roles and lots more responsibility or stakes and stuff on your shoulders. So it's like you're not just having to do this. It's kind of it all is at the same time. A lot of times it's all at the same time.
Yes.
But nevertheless, like you've got to do something with it. Like if you don't, you're just going downstream, right? Like you have to actively work on it. But like you also have to realize like this is going to take. You're going to have to keep practicing. And Cadell brought this up. Like, the more you practice doing the hard thing, the easier it gets.
That's right.
To the point where it gets easy to do the hard thing.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that it's still a hard thing, but there's like this ease of it. Not because it is easy or that it's always easy or that you're not human and won't still have struggle to do the hard thing. But there's like this not a willing spirit and a practice. It's literally just practice. If you practice doing the splits and stretching for that, you can do splits now. Lo and behold.
Well, if we hold the light shadow language, which I think is useful here.
Yeah, I love light. I love the word light because it means it has a double meaning.
Yeah. The light things are hard to stop, but easy to keep going, whereas the shadow things are easy to start and hard to stop.
Absolutely.
So that's the devious thing.
Absolutely.
Like the light things are hard to start, but once you start them, you get those habits, and it's like it's hard to stop. So it's like the light things they're hard to start, but then they become hard to stop because you see the fruit of them, and you're like, oh yeah, I want to keep doing this.
It's hard to start the light things.
Yes, and then
it's actually easy to fall out of them though.
True, but actually I think like as you see the light things and you're proven of them and you see the alternative, I think like through the years you become more confident that this is the way to do it.
Right. So then it's...
But it is interesting with the light things because there's like, they're hard to start, and there is a sense in which they're easy to just one day say, I'm not going to do it anymore because it's too hard. But then there's also, if you enter the habit phase, like Cadell's talking about, and he's right about that, then it actually becomes easy to keep doing it.
So, okay, that's a good way. It's hard to start. It's easy to keep doing it.
Yes.
It's hard to start, but once you do it,
it
actually gets easy to keep going. Whereas it's the opposite, where it's like it's easy to do the shadow.
Yes, and then it's hard to stop.
It's very hard to stop.
Yes,
Extremely hard to stop.
right.
Extremely hard to stop.
And it's interesting because in Christianity, that's basically what it says.
Exactly, and that's what I was thinking about too.
Like
it's
sin is very easy to start, and it's very hard to stop.
Absolutely.
Whereas taking up your cross is very hard to do, but then once you do it, you see the burden is light, and you see its resurrection.
It's easy, right? Exactly.
Yes.
And I mean, and that's it's funny because I think like. I think that it's interesting because the sin language can be steeped in a lot of connotations.
Sure.
And I think that at the same time though, it's like, well, look, this is a very helpful way to understand.
It's ontological. Like the Bible, for the Bible is not merely moral. It's like an ontological being.
Sin is almost like to just acknowledge that there's a shadow world and a light world.
Absolutely.
It's to acknowledge that there's counterfeits. It's to acknowledge that when you think you're being tough, you've got to really be discerning about, wait a second, is this the type of hard that actually is sublating?
No, I mean, one of the big, keys of kind of the Christian psychotechnology is the notion that sins are like good things. Like when Judas says you shouldn't, we could sell that and give it to the poor, the oil or different things. Or you have all these examples where people are doing good things, but it's out like Peter's like, I'm not going to let you get killed, Jesus. What's so critical is that sin is not merely, when you talk about sin, it is much closer to this notion of a shadow world than it is merely
bad stuff.
Exactly. It requires this kind of radical discernment, this radical discernment, and you can't assume that a good thing is good. There's this contingency, and that seems to be part of it. This realize you can't assume that something that seems good is good, and that creates self-skepticism, that creates a kind of awareness for your choices. Also, a part of this is the realization that there's alternative ways to respond to negativity in of itself. The root question, if you're responsible to it, and there's ways to respond to negativity that are going to lead you into the shadow world as opposed to the light world. And just even knowing that is a big deal. That just changes how you think about things and what you choose, and you realize that every choice could be a shadow world choice or a non-shadow world choice. That seems to be a big deal.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I think that it's a great point. And again, it just kind of keeps on making me think about original question of why is it some people get stuck, some people can sublate in the midst of a crisis or pain or whatever it is, negativity, and I think the ability to know it can be different, right? It may not be what it seems to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is because okay, for example, with sin, like your examples, where Peter's trying to protect Jesus from getting taken by the guard, the guards, the soldiers, it's not what it seems to be, right? For him, he's just protecting
Jesus,
who's come to become a beloved friend of his, and teacher. So he's doing what he thinks is best, right?
Yes.
And Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan."
Yes.
And it's so it's not, things are not what they seem to be, and it's that. But again, this takes this radical discernment. So what I mean to say is that's. Anyway, it kind of makes me think of Buber's he's kind of talks about the seemingness and how you have to kind of penetrate past what it seems, right?
Yes.
And so I think this is what this is in a sense, to kind of be able to say that it's not what it seems to be. That then gives you this kind of openness to redefine and then also to say things could be different, and I actually have the agency to see them as different or to make them different.
Absolutely. And
to not, there's sort of a sense in which that's actually almost, that is your responsibility in a sense, that is there's almost a way in which it's your job in a way to kind of be able to carve your own life, right? And then it's kind of like that Pablo Picasso quote where he says the meaning of life is to find your gift or your talent, or what, that's not the word. It's the meaning of life is to find your particular gift, right? Your gifting, right? And then the purpose of life is to give it away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so there's this, it's like you have to find out what is you and who is you, and this is why this kind of like this sense of self is very important. Like we did talk about that in the talk too, and we talked about it here now. This sort of sense of like what is, and that's why I brought up intrinsic motivation.
Sure.
I mean, I couldn't help but do that too. But like there's this sort of, and if we think about this from like the sin perspective, it's almost like you've got yourself, you got your shadow self, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like you've got to kind of get to discerning which is the light self, you know, which is the light self. And so that's going to be what you want to have the agency to carve out and like really make in the world, put it forth in the world and perpetuate it in the world, and then give it away, give it to the world, you know, in a sense.
No, absolutely. What I'm wondering about now is, you know, it's dangerous to always talk about primacy and what's like most prime, like what is most fundamental, because usually the answer is like a mixture of things. Yeah. And the answer is usually not an answer, but a management.
Right.
The realization of the shadow world, if we just use that language, because it's hard to figure out a different language, I wonder if that's like primary. And the reason I say that is because like, look, like everyone has listened to college speeches or Steve Jobs talks about like following your passion and having meaning, like the stuff about the meaning crisis. I mean, Daniel Pink's book on the freaking Drive is like 2007. Like Viktor Frankl's work, like the notion of meaning has been known. People are told from elementary school to be who you want to be. Things can be different, and yet they're not. So there's a few things going on. Like basically, when we talk about knowing there are alternatives, I would say 99% of people hear that. And yet it doesn't sink in for some reason.
That there are
that you can be who you want to be. Like, I would say 99%, let's say, of Americans, when they were young, probably heard, you can be who you want to be.
Right.
So hearing that is not it.
No.
Okay, so we can go through. Most people also are taught to some degree that they're responsible.
Yes.
Okay? And that doesn't seem to be it. And yet we've also noted, you know, we've gone through and said these things matter.
Right.
So
but
the question
don't
is,
seem to be it in language, perhaps.
Yeah, like people are hearing it.
Yes.
But they're not changing.
Yes.
Okay, so this is what we have to home in on. People also know family matters.
Yeah.
Everyone hears that. Everyone knows family matters.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to work. And also people know that toughness matters. They like people watch football, they know toughness matters. So that's not it. So the question, and yet all of those are part of it.
Yeah.
And yet those so far don't seem to be it if you're just told about them. So whatever is it is something that lights a fire under all of those. Do you see what I'm saying? Like people... So hearing these things doesn't seem to be it. Because lots of people hear these things.
Right.
Whatever it is, it's something that puts a fire under people to really take these things seriously. And I do wonder if that fire is the realization of the shadow world. Like this, like, oh my gosh, you can do something you think is good and end up entrapped. You can, like, be doing what you think is love and you end up hurting people. Like, is the realization of the shadow world the primary thing that, like, puts the fire under you to implement all of these things in a serious way?
I think so. I think that is a very good point, because I think when you have A as A, you will not.
Shadow world makes AB, doesn't it? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Shadow and light world make an AB, and they're always in dialogue with each other. You know, you're not going to get rid of the shadow, but that's in a sense is okay if you know that, right? If you know how to walk toward the light, right? Mm-hmm. In a sense, you know what I mean? Like shadow world's there, and you won't get rid of it. But you can either participate in the shadow world or in the light world, right? Right. And so, in a sense, to acknowledge the shadow world, that it, like you're saying, that it exists, I think seems to be a very, very big part of actually
the motivation.
Yeah, and like stepping into AB, like when you're in the AB, I think you get a lot more able to face negativity, right? Because in AA, it's just, you get stuck in negativity, right? Because, well, A equals A. If you encounter it, well, that's what it is, right?
That's right. The shadow world is reality.
Exactly. But you don't think of it as the shadow world.
It's just reality.
It's just the world to you. You don't know that it's...
Yeah. In order for it to be the shadow world, by definition, that requires an AB recognition.
So, like, and in this idea of, like, it being the world, to you, it's the light world. Yes. There's no way in which you could see it as a shadow world, because you've always known it to be what is. Yes. Right? So it, and technically, in a way, it is the light world to you. So it's kind of weird because
this is what's weird.
The negativity is going to present itself like the shadow world or something like that.
Satan's an angel of light.
Right. So there's like this oscillation. Like you've got to be able to, it's kind of like when and I don't know enough about this to even talk about it, but they talk about like shadow work and Jungian stuff. But there's the point of that is, to me, is to actually. It's almost like, and this is where, though there can be pitfalls to the language, the idea of kind of like embracing like, oh right, I'm ontologically off. That's what it means to be a sinner, right?
Yes.
That's what it means to say, wait a second, I have a shadow side or a shadow world that I engage in or have engaged in or might be in right now. I have to kind of step back and say, wait, it's AB, and let me think about this for a second. Is this the shadow or is this the light? What is the phenomenological experience of those things? And
what will it lead to?
Right, exactly. I think are big parts of like maybe actually taking the words, the words of responsibility and, you can be who you can be any alternative, you can be anyone you want to be, where it actually realizes like, wait a second, those things have totally different implications when you understand there's a light world and shadow world.
Yeah, like the meaning of those phrases and those notions is completely different.
Yes.
If there's a shadow and a light world. Now, of course, this sounds dualistic, and we're not talking about that. By shadow world, what we've tried to say is this notion of you do what you think is right, and it ends up bad. You follow what you think is like the right thing to do, and you end up ensnared and trapped and all this different stuff. So what's interesting too is if you realize the shadow and light world, then definitely for me, like that's one of the reasons you move toward intrinsic motivation. Because when you're extrinsically motivated, you're more likely to fall into the shadow world because your motivations are external to you, which can lead you down a road that could get you into what you think is good that's actually bad. So intrinsic motivation becomes a kind of logical strategy, because then you're following things motivating you for you, of which you have examined and have very good reason to think are not leading you to the shadow world.
Well, it's kind of funny to think about that because, it's like, who makes the shadow? Who makes your shadow?
Yeah.
You make your shadow, There's something about kind of also understanding that's important because,
yes,
like the example
you're
of
responsible.
People pleasing.
Yes.
The only reason why, now you may have mirrored that or something and like you've adopted it into your way of being because you saw that, or you didn't get approval unless you please people,
yes,
etc., etc. So it's not like, in a way, it's kind of like, it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility now to realize that, like, if you stay there, you are making that shadow.
Yes.
By your orientation toward it. And so it's interesting because, like, what are shadows but things that they have no substance in and of themselves, right? So I guess what I mean to say is, like, if we're talking about discernment and how do you kind of even gain discernment in this kind of like flipping coin, right? It's almost like shadow and the light are two sides of the same coin. It's almost like, well, what actually is the substance? How does this, like, the word substance and sustain come to mind? Like, is it sustainable? What does this lead to? What is the sustenance of this? Like, those words can kind of, I think, it's kind of funny because it's also like, well, what other word is close to suspect, right? Or like suspicious.
Yeah.
But there is a kind of healthy suspicion to your own like preconceived ideas, right? That you have to have
completely
in order to break out of your shadow world into the light world, or to turn yourself around so that you're not just seeing yourself as your shadow versus your actual self, which is funny because we may actually want to see the shadow because then we could actually see something of ourselves, right? The externalization of it, where you turn around and you don't see your shadow, you don't see anything. So now you're like, well, wait a second, am I here? It's a very strange, interesting pair. I feel like there's something really interesting about that.
Yeah, there is something where you look at your shadow, you're like, oh, evidence I exist.
At least I'm there.
Yeah, I'm there.
Even if
I'm confirmed.
Even if I'm a shadow.
Yeah, well, there's something about the shadow world that's full of confirmation, external confirmation.
Exactly.
You're given certain, everyone thinks like this, so it must be right. There's something about seeing a shadow that goes, oh, look, that's me. I'm here. I'm like, confirmed.
Right.
Where if you're looking out, you don't see yourself really. You just see the world.
Just see the world. Yep.
So you vanish, and that's kind of terrifying.
But that's kind of like vanish. That's kind of that sort of symbolizes the vanishing of your ego.
Yes.
Like where you have to let go of your ego, you have to let go of like what you thought you knew, etc., etc., to kind of just see what is. right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you kind of let yourself just be the flow state of the self, the self-propelling wheel, the Nietzschean spirit
That's
child,
right.
it's all of this where it just sees the world. It's not so self-absorbed in the sense that it's self-conscious in the bad way, right? Where it's like constantly worrying about what they're doing.
That's right.
Like they're mind. It's like this kind of, that's the sublation, right? Where you're wise about what you're doing, but you're not paranoid about what you're doing. That you enter that place of the spirit child, where it's like this hard work to get to the place of the just being, and just being with the world and seeing the world, right?
Yeah.
And offering yourself into it.
Well, I mean, all this definitely screams Plato's allegory of the cave. And there is a sense in which the realization you might be looking at shadows on the wall and think it's real things, then can be the very realization can then make you turn around and leave. And again, as you know, for me, thinking of Nietzsche as the question of how do you leave Plato's cave if no one drags you out is the way to think about Nietzsche. Yeah. And so the question is, like, how do you come to think that the shadows on the wall are shadows on the wall? And how do you come to realize that you can mistake shadows as real things that aren't real?
Right. Yeah. Sorry, continue.
And now the problem is, though, that the narrative, like, actually the allegory of the cave can now function itself as a kind of shadow, because you just assume that you're someone who's left the cave. So that's a kind of danger. And then there's also an unfortunate kind of hierarchyism that can be created from people that stay in the cave versus not. It's almost like you need to imagine the allegory of the cave as you're the only person in the cave, and you either leave or not. So it's not really a hierarchy. Like, it's either you have your cave, you have your life, you leave or not. And you kind of think of it that way. But there is something, and it does make me wonder, like, if we talk about Plato's forms as trajectories as opposed to perfections, like the orbits of planets, then basically to see the forms instead of the shadows is to align yourself with the correct trajectory for living life.
Yeah,
as
the
opposed,
telos, yeah.
Yeah,
right?
the telos, as opposed to thinking perfection. And so that reading of Plato would certainly align a bit with what we're saying.
Yeah, that was all really good, Daniel. I was thinking about how shadows don't have faces, right? You look at, you can't see your face. You can't see kind of the particularity and the complexion.
Right.
All of those things, right? So there's a way in which it kind of makes me think of, like, it kind of makes me think of this idea of having, like, there's something about facing, like, I guess for me it says, like, how when you ask the question of how do you come to realize the shadows aren't the thing itself,
yes.
or something, it's like there's something about realizing that it's like it's not the substance, you can't see the face, right? And there's something about, like, kind of leaving the cave is like you actually face the mother's face, right? Like, it's
That's
like
right.
the womb, right? Then you leave, and, like, now you actually face the other's face, and it makes me think of, like, the determination of self, or of the existence of I hate using the word self, because, like,
sure.
Through this talk we've kind of talked about, like, self, big self, little, but, like, the light self, let's put it that way,
sure.
is to kind of see it in the other, right? But also, like, the mother face, right? But then to have it be like we're always brought into the existence, like, through that way, right? Where we see faces, and then we realize, like, we have a face, right? Like, and then it's kind of solidifies your own existence. That is, like, then you realize, like, I'm the face that then becomes a face to the others too.
Yes.
So it's just kind of like this. Really, the simple point was that shadows don't have faces, and so you go out to seek a face, basically.
Sure, and, like, shadows don't have nuance or go into the
sure.
details, so you have a lower resolution of thought, and that's a big problem. Well, this begs the question then, if what's fundamental for the correct response to negativity is the realization of the appearance-reality divide, where appearances are not reality necessary. Sure. And does that realization generate intrinsic motivation, right? But of course, the problem is, like we said, all of those notions from earlier, people hear, well, I would say most people hear that things aren't what you think, like, things aren't what they seem.
Right.
Like, people hear that, but they don't internalize it. So why don't they internalize it? Well, then this begs the question, do you have to have... Is it come back to that Christian notion of it's either, like, devastation or beauty? Like are you devastated? And then you go, oh wait, things are not what they seem. Oh, or you have beauty and like, oh my gosh, things aren't what they seem. Beauty's possible. But then of course that doesn't really answer it because people experience devastation and respond in a poor way. So then you just come back to that. Like you say, why do people respond? So because you can't say that it's necessarily negativity that make people take seriously the appearance reality divide. Because we were saying at the very beginning that people experience negativity and respond differently. Mm-hmm. So then, of course, why does one person respond to the negativity in a manner that takes seriously the shadow world and everything that corresponds to that, and other people respond to the negativity in a manner that makes them not take seriously the shadow world, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe then it's the presence of having all of those other notions in their head that can all be activated at the same time. It's almost like they all have to be activated at once, maybe? Like, they all have to be there, like wisdom, toughness, relationship, things can be different, all those things we talked about. Like, the C's have to all be there, and then the event occurs that activates them all at the same time, but they all have to be there to be activated at the same time. I think there's something to that. I think the language of I certainly can resonate with the language of event. Sure.
Because there are often things where like nobody knows the timing, but it's like these things that just suddenly become like breaking points for people.
Yes. Right,
where the breakdown is the breakthrough, or that concept, like with, I think that was Toulouse, I don't know, but sure. But basically just like that. And so there's like, we don't, there seem to be components that make one more susceptible to getting stuck or more susceptible to sublating.
Yes.
And those components, if you have them, it's almost like having all of the ingredients for a fire or something like that. And then you just wait till that, like, you keep getting the sparks, and then it's just going to catch one. So
yeah, that seemed like, and then
that's the event, and then it ignites. And I think it's very difficult to, because the thing is that I think there is inevitably going to be some element of mystery, but I do think the components are not actually a mystery, right? It's in a way,
it's what triggers the components are not a mystery, but what triggers
the integration of the components into oneself.
The integration and activation of the components.
Yes.
Into something very deep seems to be
the mystery. Yeah.
So all of those components seem to be the puzzle pieces, but then the event that integrates and simultaneously, it's like they're integrated and activated at the same time.
Yes, yeah.
Okay? So what causes that seems to be mysterious. And of course the answer would be probably relative to each person. But if I think of myself, I've told this story before, and I go back, though, because I am very interested in this appearance-reality divide. Mm. The problem is people hear that divide, and they merely hear it in terms of, the news is lying to you, or, truth.
Yeah.
They hear it in terms of a truth, right. Something you think is true can actually be false. But what we're talking about in the shadow world language is almost like the divide between what you think is good and what is good. It's almost less about it is truth, but it's like the emphasis on, what you genuinely think is good can actually be disastrous.
Exactly.
And that seems to be a different emphasis than emphasizing the news is tricking you, or truth, or something you think is a fact turns out to be falsity. It's like your own intentions. It's like thinking about the appearance reality divide in terms of intention, in meaning, and relationships, which seems critical here. That's slightly different. And the difference is big because it's like, when we say the appearance reality divide, we can't help but think about that in terms of we know what reality is. But really the key is to think that you're more likely to mistake reality with appearance than otherwise. Generally when we talk about the appearance reality divide, I think the key was for me realizing that I naturally was incapable, I did not naturally know that difference.
Yep.
As opposed to you mostly kind of, when you hear about that divide, you go, oh, well, I'm pretty good at recognizing that difference. for me, it was a big deal to like realize, oh my gosh, it's more likely I'll get that wrong than right. Because once you realize it's more likely, because once you realize it's more likely you'll get that wrong than right, then you're on your toes. Then there are stakes. Then you're like really motivated. And
well,
for me,
is that motivated, or can that become paranoia?
It can be paranoia. It depends on it. Well, then, yeah, that begs the question again. Why would some people respond to that with paranoia, and some people respond with like, oh, I better get a strategy? Because for me, the thing that, again, the thing that I heard that was to me just like, changed everything was when my grandmother just she just made a point, just kind of said this, and my dad said it as well. But they both, at different points, said, no one gets married planning to get divorced. And that was like a bomb going off. And the reason it was is because it was like, oh my gosh, no one gets married planning to get a divorce. So how the frickin' heck does the brain work? Like,
well, it's like this, then why are people saying, what's going on?
Yeah, because people
happens,
will literally die for one another. At the beginning, when they're getting married, they genuinely mean it. Like, they genuinely, this is the most important person in their life. And then they get to the point, like, divorces are nasty. Like, people hate each other. Usually, very often, not always. How does that happen?
Exactly. Like, how the heck does that happen?
Like, to me, it was like, oh my gosh, how does that happen? And taking that seriously suddenly made philosophy thinking and, like, a very, very big deal. Now, of course, it begs the question, why would somebody hear your grandmother say, that phrase?
And why would that be a bomb going off in your head?
Where for other people they would
didn't even notice it.
Yeah, they wouldn't even notice the phrase. So the question still hangs. But that to me was a big deal. That phrase, that hearing that and really taking that seriously made the human being one giant mystery.
Yeah.
And then it also it did have a big impact on how I thought about sin, and when the Bible talks about sin and all those things, it's like, oh, it's like a shadow world. That's how I thought about it. Like, not that I had the language of shadow world, I'm just saying that kind of like, oh my gosh, people are genuinely doing what they think is good, and to the point that they're willing to like put their life down for it, and they're wrong. Because that's the key. Like, if you get married, you're saying death do us part. So you're, for all practical purposes, you're claiming that you are so confident in this decision that you'll risk everything. And yet people are getting it wrong. Like, miserably wrong. So how is that possible?
Right.
Well, you take that seriously, then life changes in character.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of does, I was kind of having a hard time understanding how these things would, like, relate to motivation.
Sure.
But here's how I see it. Suddenly you're like, you have this burning question of, like, why?
Yes.
And how?
Yes.
And you're motivated simply to, like, literally just try to answer those questions.
Yeah, you are, definitely.
And you'll
and not to fall. You're motivated not to fall into it.
Right.
If it happens to other people, why couldn't it happen to you?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think, and I see. It's funny because, like, you're saying, like, what? Why does somebody get motivated and another person gets paranoid?
Yes.
But, like, I don't know, but I think yeah, it probably has to do with a lot of the reasons we already talked about. But I do think that just simply for me, the way it makes a lot of sense is like, because I guess I can resonate a lot with having questions, right?
Yes.
With being like, I'm really, really, like, this is so, like, I really want to think about this, or I really want to read about this, or whatever, because you're just like, wow, this is so perplexing, right?
Yes.
But it, like, drives you to want to understand it better.
Yes.
And obviously you want to understand it better and learn more about it, so you integrate that into your own life, right? So that you do, you learn from it and, like, take what you learn and actually live out what you learn, basically. And so I think to me it's like, I see how the motivation comes in here. I guess what I mean to say is, like, curiosity, questions, like, actually going after, like, questions that really matter to life. Not just, what year was the defenestration of Prague?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying, like, that doesn't matter. Maybe you're really interested in that. That's cool. But, like, these questions that actually have to do with life, to me, it's like that's the motivation. Like, that's, to me, related to motivation.
Yeah, I do. I'm glad you brought this up, because I have been thinking a lot lately about, when people talk about finding meaning crisis and all that, There's a part of me that thinks like finding meaning in life requires finding a puzzle. Like finding a puzzle you're trying to solve or a problem that really interests you. Like, we were talking at the net about this idea of kind of this apophatic mystery, like of the apophatic subject, or you decide there's a difference between the love of your spouse and the love of your friends, but it's not qualitative or quantitatively clear why. But the reason why they're different emerges in the doing.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of puzzle there, right? So likewise, you're like, why do people get married if they get divorced? There's a puzzle there, right? And then the puzzle, but the puzzle also has to have stakes, though, like for you to care to solve it. So this is where it like, do the stakes come from the fact that the puzzle is a puzzle and you want to solve it, or does the puzzle have stakes because if you don't figure it out, you may end up in a divorce? So you have this chicken and egg problem now. You see, like this is why this itness, this question of response to negativity, seems very, very interesting and strange in character, because everything seems to circle into everything else. Like the question of courage, relationship, puzzle, meaning, shadow world, they all seem to like start in they all seem to begin at the same time. Like they all activate at the same time. So then it's like, well, what activates them? It seems like they're all like, what do you put in a fireplace? It's like they're all embers, but not that. Like you put the logs, or it's like they're all logs.
Like fodder.
Yeah, it's like they're all fodder, but they're not the spark. We're asking what the spark is.
Yeah.
The event. So what's the spark? And can the fodder be the spark? Maybe a person needs all of these, but based on personality, one of them's a spark. But for another person, it's a different spark. Yeah. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
maybe the spark is located in these elements, these fodder things that we've described. And for one person, like what's the spark out of that fodder varies between people. For some people, it would just be the realization of the shadow world. For other people, it would be the realization of alternative. For another person, it would be the realization of a puzzle. Does that make, like it could be a different spark, and yet it's composed of this. It's all it always involves all of this fodder, but the spark can be a different one of these fodders relative to the person.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, and I think it's going to be relative in the sense that like we're all relational, right? We get all these things in us from relations, in a sense.
Yes.
How we relate to ourselves, how do we relate to people, how we relate to the world. Those things kind of like, in a sense, kind of condition us to be receptive to particular conditions, right?
Yes.
Like we're conditioned to certain conditions, you know what I mean? So like, I guess what I mean to say is it's almost like having 3 types of material. They're going to have different things that would like, ways in which they, or like, whatever you want to say, burn points or whatever, that can actually make them ignite, right?
Yes.
And, I think that something that the word that came to mind that when you were talking, Daniel, was honestly it does make me think of the word grace.
Sure.
Where there's kind of this sort of mystery of it, in this grace in the sense of it that you really don't know.
That's
so
right.
you just kind of keep going. And something Cadell mentioned in the talk was like it's very hard when you see somebody who maybe needs to, like, you wish for them to be able to face negativity in a way that doesn't leave them depressed, lacking motivation, in a really kind of a bad spot, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you're like, you wish you could do something for them, but really, like, nobody can do it but themselves, right?
That's right.
However, you could maybe be fodder for them so that when the spark does come, it takes off. Like fodder in the sense that you encourage them, or you just be like a loving presence to them or something, Like, it might not be your job to be that for them. It depends, right?
Right.
But what I mean to say is, like, you can't make the spark happen, because that seems to be like the event somehow. Maybe you will inevitably, like, somehow, right? Somehow it could potentially be. But, like, this is this, like, funny grace area where it's like,
yes,
you just don't know. You don't know how you're being used or not used to be a spark for somebody or not. Or maybe it's, like, just something completely other, like they just...
Yes.
That doesn't even have to do with people. Maybe it's just something they experience in nature. Who knows? But what I mean to say is, like, the fodder seems to be the only thing we may have some control over, but the rest is grace. It seems it's just completely out of our hands.
Yeah.
It's and it's only in our hands in so much as we keep going, right? Like,
Sure.
we keep moving.
Well, a few things, and I know we have to get Reed to bed, so alas, just as, because
so it's like, I feel like we should preface this, like, we do these really late at night, so sorry for the yawning and the it's like,
but the topic is
like
fascinating.
The topic's extremely fascinating.
Another one, it seems to have something to do with facing fear, obviously. That's another element of it, and certainly I would say that everyone needs to gather these fodders that we've described into their arsenal, regardless. But then, like, for people to truly care, in that Heideggerian sense, where the meaning of life is care almost, like it seems to be some sort of grace, some sort of spark. That's what I was just going to note. That's just another psychotechnology that Christianity it was really impressive to develop, because in grace it's like, hey, everything you think you've accomplished, nah, it was given to you by Jesus. So there's a mysterious operation of grace that is making people different and like Christ and not others. Oh, and it's not you can't take pride in it. You can't claim it's your doing. So, like, the doctrine of grace is a kind of event that doesn't allow people to see themselves as better than others for having undergone that event versus not. Because that would be a problem, right? Well, like, if you didn't have if you had an idea that some people, have escaped Plato's cave and others have not, it'd be very difficult not to create a hierarchy, like a kind of social hierarchy, right? Well, one of the ways Christianity as a psychotechnology dealt with that is the idea of grace, which is, that's a major problem now, because if you accept some integral theory of spiral dynamics, it's very difficult not to make it sound like coral is superior to blue. Like, how are higher colors not superior to lower colors? Right. And of course, the people in the theory would say that's not what we're saying. And yeah, they're not saying that. But it's very difficult for the person who is, say, metamodern or coral not to subconsciously think of themselves as better. It's hard in Christianity, not like that's one of the things that is constantly emphasized, like as you work towards sanctification, the temptation to take pride in that sanctification goes up and up and up and up. It's a very difficult problem, but even like Christianity as a psychotechnology is even freaking aware of the problem, and that's very advanced. And again, we just don't appreciate the psychotechnologies of religion. We really don't. But the doctrine of grace here is very important. Because if at the end of the day the problem has to fall back on a kind of mystery or a kind of grace or a kind of event, well then the very occurrence of that has to be in the mind in a manner that does not allow pride.
Right, and that's it's a really important, really, really, really important point where, this accepting that it's out of your hands. But what is it? What you have a choice in? Like, will you accept the grace when you encounter it?
Yes.
So in a sense, yes, you have this agency. We're not talking about just sort of like flopping around like a fish. Like, well, grace will make, grace will make me accomplish my hopes and dreams. No, you keep doing the thing. You just don't know. You don't know when it's going to take off necessarily, but you keep doing what you can do. But when it does happen, you realize that there's this element of you doing and you not doing. This is the A-B-ness, right? Yes. Grace is a type of A-B. Yes. It's a type of it's not something you can say you did yourself alone, right? Because like it's not just you. It's grace, but it's also you did do something because you accepted it. Yes. You accepted the grace when you encountered it. You know what I mean? Yes. So I don't know I hope that makes sense. But to me, I see a lot of A-B-ness there, and I think that's important because, like you're saying, there's like this sense of there's things you can do and there's things you can't do, and this humbles you because then you realize it's not really it's like you're making your own life, but you don't know if you'll make it happen or whatever, but you can make your life, right? And there's sort of this sense in which like that's in and of itself you accept the graces that come along with that.
Well, the emphasis in Christianity as a psychotechnology is that you're nothing without Christ. Therefore, you have agency on deciding if you think you're nothing without Christ. And that very belief you can do nothing then makes you open to something. So the agency in Christianity is in the negative, but it is still a kind of agency that's very important. And that's actually a big deal because, like, basically Christianity, your response to negativity is in fact going, yeah, I can't do anything about negativity. I need grace. And like there's something like that's what's kind of weird. The Christian response to like making people respond to negativity well is to make them really go to the depths of believing they can do nothing without Christ. So in a funny way, it's like by going to the extreme of saying you can't respond right to negativity, it like reverses. It almost makes you think about what Cadell was saying, like, you love the ice cream, well, just eat the ice cream, like, go all in then, until you're like, oh, I don't want this anymore, like with the video game thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, he's like, oh, just play video games, and then you're like, this is boring. And, like, just, like, really, really just go in. Like, it's almost like a good way to respond to negativity is to really, 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 really believe you can't respond well to it, and you're just gonna, like,
you will just mess up.
You will just mess up. Like, and then if you, like, really, really face that, then you're like, oh, I can't do that. I don't want to be, you know, playing video games all day. So I do wonder, like, maybe there's an irony here where you respond badly to negativity by not taking negativity seriously enough, like by not being negative enough. Maybe you go through, like, maybe that's the negation here. Like, I guess when I encountered negativity, I was like, I really thought about, like, really clearly what it would mean to respond to that negativity in a defeatist way. Like, I looked at what that would do to the, like, whole of my life and really thought about what a bad response to negativity would mean. And then I also, well, that's interesting, because then I also was like, yeah, and if I was left to my own devices, I would do that. So I better go talk with Mr. Dillard. I better turn to the books. I better create habits of, like, creating and not following the system. Like, because there is, like, if you really take seriously that you will naturally suck, basically. Like, if you're like, yeah, then you actually look outside yourself.
Well, that's what I was saying about the, like, shadows don't have faces. Where you look outside yourself. This is very much like Buber too.
Yes.
Like, in his, you know, like, something too that, like, I think is interesting. Again, like, some excerpt that I saw through Rivera was, like, his critique of Heidegger. We don't have to get into that. Sure. But the main point is this idea that Buber is saying, basically, that it's through the other. It's through this turning outside of yourself and realizing that in that is this ability to be able to transcend, right? Like, or have these transcendent moments, these transcendent encounters, the I thou. I don't want to talk about, like, don't take that too ethereally here, like, this term transcend. But the thing is, facing negativity and sublating is a type of transcending, right? Sure. It's to basically say, well, I'm going to not just see it as just what it is. I'm going to see it as something
it's a kind of finite transcending.
Exactly, it's a finite transcending, right? So basically, I guess I just want to say that I see a lot of, like, Buber here. It's the between the two people, the one, and then seeking the other, seeking the habit, seeking the creative outlet, to sort of have this sort of, like, ability to encounter the thou, and then also be able to substantiate yourself as the I. But it will never be, like, just this, you know, it's very much that it's always kept in like this dialectic, or the AB, you know? Like, it's never just going to be some sort of pure...
Right.
That's the thing, because if you just stay on yourself and isolate, to your own devices, you're just going to end up, like, sucking. You know what I mean? Like, it's not... You can't just... It's very strange. It's like you're holding this as a tension place of, like, you're going to have to do it yourself, and you're the only one who can do it. And you realize that you could never do it all by yourself.
Yeah, this is what's weird. Like, you realize that it's up to you.
But you don't become codependent and put on other people to do it. It's like you have to, like, just be in a posture of, like, learning and kind of taking what you learn to kind of be shaped and molded in that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, it's the enter the alien. There's something alien here with the human being. So there's, like, you realize that it's up to you, and that you can't do it. Exactly, and that there's something in the it's up to you and you can't do it that then makes you look outward, that then leads to the correct response to negativity. So it's precisely, there's something about, like, really, like, being, it's almost like you respond to negativity well when you somehow, like, truly believe that you're going to respond to it badly. And if you think that, then you're like, well, I gotta change.
Well, see, and see, that's a great example, because you're kind of always being self-skeptical.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to probably handle this badly, makes you say, wait a second, my default, the thing I just keep on doing by default
is bad. It's probably going to lead me in the bad direction.
I just need to be self-skeptical about
Yes.
that, because what I'm doing by default might be the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And if you aren't, and the thing is, though, you're so, if again, like we talked about, you have a morality of it, though, that you're like, the fact that I would question this and do the alternative feels so alien, right? Like, to use that word again, it feels so alien to do that, but that might be the very thing you must do. And, you know, if you don't, then you end up kind of like, you know, it's funny because it's weird. There's like this self-propagation in either direction, right? Of like, shadow lead to more shadow, lead to more shadow.
Yes.
Light lead to more light, to more light. So, you know, it's important to be self-skeptical, because your defaults are the things that are, you know, basically you kind of just constantly self-relating. It's your constant self-relation.
Kind leads to kind. You know, that, I mean, well, the thing...
So it's like, you know, getting outside of that's just...
loop.
Ouroboros of like your self-relation is to bring it into the infinity, right, where you've got the two. You've got you and God, or you and your mentor, or you and your creative act, you know, procreation, whatever it is. It's you and it's the other.
Yeah.
And you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be another person, but it often can be. But, you know, it can be something that's just outside of yourself, but not... See, we confuse this for the externalities of affirmation or of comfort or of whatever it is. No, it's a different type of other. It's a different type of externalizing, to internalize, to integrate, to
it's
sublate.
Ontological. I mean, it's an ontological otherness that you believe you need and that you don't have. Like, it's self-relating negativity, right? I mean, so some people respond to negativity in a self-relation way that leads to effacement. And then there's some people that respond to negativity in a manner where they say, wow, I'm trapped in a self-relation. I need to look outside myself to sublate.
Yes.
So, like, what makes a person respond to negativity in a manner that makes them look outside themselves, as opposed to just go into themselves? And, you know, like,
and looking outside yourself can also just be to look at what could be different, right? And
well,
and
by definition.
By definition, and like, I could do something different, right? That in and of itself is to look outside yourself.
Yeah, self-relation means the same.
Right.
You know, it's the sameness. Looking outside yourself is the only way to have difference and alternative. So, like, in this kind of alternative is ontological. Like, where you really, really, really... And that's the weird thing. Again, Christianity is a psychotechnology. It's like, you will not change until you believe you can't change. Which then makes total sense in the context of you can't change within the self-relation. So once you truly, truly believe you can't change, then you look outside the self-relation. So you have to have that bothness. Like liberation from self-relation comes from a very paradoxical belief that you can't escape, like, that you can't change.
Yes.
So once you, like, deeply believe you can't change, you then look outside yourself. Mm-hmm. Because in yourself, there's no ability to change.
Yeah.
So that's the double move that's going on here. That's the really weird move. But then, of course, it just begs the question, why do some people respond to frickin' negativity in a manner that makes them look outside themselves as opposed to just in themselves? So it just feels like you can always move the question, is the only issue.
Well, that's the thing. It's always going to be there. I don't think, you know, you kind of, we would roll for.
I mean, we've described mechanisms.
I think though to face the question and to attempt to answer it, though, I think that's very fruitful, though. It is for me, because I think...
It's like theology. I mean, you can't ever get to the essence of God, but the very, like, tracing of God in imperfection is actually extremely important.
I will say with this whole, like, why do some people... I mean, I can't help but think about self-relation as your own kind of womb. It's your own sort of return to the womb.
Your own womb.
Yeah, it's your own womb. Yeah, you just gotta keep going back into yourself in this constant self-relating.
Self-relation is making your own womb. Making yourself a womb.
And the weird thing is, though, it's like you know, the womb
looking out is birthing, then. Like, going out is the birth
This is why
womb.
Conceptual mediation is important, though, Daniel.
Yes, completely.
Because guess what? When you actually conceive, then you can birth a child.
Yes.
You know, if you're just constantly in your womb, like, womb is supposed to be the symbol of fertility and potential.
Yes.
But this is kind of a barren womb in a way.
Yes.
You know, like, you're the child that was supposed to be out of the womb. but
Sure.
you kind of keep putting yourself back in there, you know, and
I mean, one could say that hell is a womb that never births.
exactly.
You know, you're always like, hell is a womb that never births. I'd have to consider that, but
Yeah, there's something there that could be interesting, but I think, like, you know, this is why there the ability to press into what's uncomfortable is so key, right? Like,
yeah, you can't birth otherwise.
yeah, like, well, you just want to go back into the, you know, the return to the womb is a lot about just like protection mechanism and safety, you know, and like, I think the willingness to say, like, you know what, you can be birthed and it will be hard, but you can do hard things and you are safe in the other.
Yes.
That's really key, because it's not about, like, we still will have these reliances on safety. You can't, like, kick that out completely, you know? Like,
Sure.
we'd kind of be fooling ourselves to think we can just be living, like, without the bothness of
Sure.
safety and danger that are always in oscillation, you know? So it's like, you find a safety in the other, you know? It's a type of, I think there's a type of maturing there, right? There's a maturation process that occurs in the safety of the other versus just the safety in yourself, which ends up being like when you just, I don't know, there's something about, like, trying to preservation. It's kind of like Ebert stuff, right? Where there's a
Sure.
lot of, like, we get into trouble when we constantly just want to preserve what is.
Yes.
Instead of allowing for birth and death and all of that.
Yes.
And so, ironically, the preservation is what ends up killing, like,
Yeah.
killing your spirit. You know, it's almost like putting a, you know, if you have a candle, right, and you put, like, a glass over it, what happens? It goes out.
Well, is a part.
The very thing you wanted to protect you, like, kills you, right? Like,
Is it then that a part of the problem, like, you need to respond to negativity in a manner of, like, going, like, there's a responding to negativity where the negativity destroys something that was pre-existing, like, you're not allowing that destruction to occur, so you then efface yourself, as opposed to you respond to the negativity, you man, well, yeah, the thing died and things changed and things weren't the way I was supposed to go, but that's how it's supposed to be.
right, so it's kind of like it's either one destruction or another destruction.
Yeah, there's
right?
a way in which negativity is the process itself. Is the negativity is the change itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's one way where it says, oh yeah, things are supposed to change or they die, or
You won't accept change and you die anyway.
yeah.
I mean, it's, you know what I mean? Like, the very unwillingness to die will make you actually...
Or just not being able to accept the trauma of change. Like, change is a kind of trauma, right?
Absolutely.
And so, but then, of course, it begs the question, why do some people, you know, accept the trauma of change and others don't?
And some people just, you know, take more time to do it. You know, like,
Yeah,
it's
sure,
almost like
sure,
they're
sure.
trauma healing,
It does
moving on, sort of...
And I know we have to get ready to bed, but it does seem to be theological in character, this question, because it's like deepest ontology, okay?
Yeah.
And theology, the structure of a theological inquiry is one of which the ultimate answer is a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you can still reach true knowledge about that mystery. So that's what theology is always doing. Like, the final result is an unknown, but meaningful knowledge about that unknown becomes possible in the constructing of a convincing argument, right? So likewise, it seems like if you're dealing with this particular question of the response of negativity, it seems to fall in the realm of deepest ontology. And deepest ontology seems to be a thing that must be a mystery because it's a very animating principle of being, of beings, of humans. Where if you believe in God, God is a very animating principle of the universe, so you can't really get a final answer on the animating principle unless you are that animating principle. So likewise, perhaps all you can do with this is answer why you respond to negativity the way you do, but you can't get a general answer of a response to negativity because the answer literally is particularized. In the same way that if God is living, like why God does what he does, there is no universal. It's the particular historic moment in which God acts. You know, sometimes God is angry, sometimes God is loving, sometimes he shows up in the Holy Spirit, sometimes it's Jesus. And if you want like a general principle for that difference, it's inseparable from the historical moment of the event, because that's why, of the occurrence that you're questioning, because that's why the occurrence happened the way that it did, because it was meeting time like it did. So likewise, if each individual has certain levels of difference, then the particular answer of why they respond to negativity like they do seems very bound up to the individual. But of course, the problem with this is then that might just be just as deterministic as saying it's genetic, and therefore you can't systemize the answer, and therefore you might not be able to solve the meta crisis. So if indeed this answer ultimately is theological in question, that could be a problem. Like, it does seem to have something like grace going on, but then the question would be, is it possible to spread the conditions that increase the likelihood that the grace occurs? If the answer is no, then you might have major problems. If the answer is yes, then we need to do those things.
Right.
So then we need to figure out if they, it would seem like there's quite great imperative to figure out if the answer is yes or no.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with that, we should try to put Reed to bed, I think. So anyway, but I do think, like, tracing it would suggest, I think everything we've said, it does seem to be that you would want a society that creates opportunities to encounter that fodder versus not.
Yeah.
So that at least might be a productive thing to say. So that audience is like, why did we listen to this? They're like,
well, we had fun, guys.
Well, that was great. We had a good time. I hope you did too, because this is OG Rose.
Sorry, I had to say I had like a little wordplay that I always love doing. But like when you said like, what you said something about what was the sentence
fodder.
You said about fodder?
Society, we need to like create conditions of encountering the fodder versus not.
Yeah, I heard, because I'm very sleepy and have had a headache. No, I do, but it's okay. But like I heard when you said that, I was like, I thought you said father.
Yeah, the conditions of fatherhood.
Well, what I'm saying is, like, it's funny. It's like to encounter the father. Like, obviously, the deeply theological implications of that are like, to encounter the father.
Yeah.
I was just like, and that would also relate to like one's actual paternal. Like
sure.
your father, that like your lineage. Kind of the understanding too, like of your own.
Yeah. Your
own creator nature in yourself, or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot there, and there's a lot that's unanswered, but there's a lot too that's in trying to answer is very helpful. For me personally, like
sure.
Maybe this is kind of selfish, but to me it's very helpful, because like there's a way in which it's like, well, I Lord knows I have things I'm still working on in terms of facing negativity. So for me it's like, oh great, like there's a lot to be able to work with and understand the potential for, which is exciting.
Yeah.
To me that's exciting.
Sure.
So
yeah, I mean, the answer at the end of the day could be that scene out of Fight Club, where everyone on planet Earth needs to have Tyler take him out back and be like, what'd you want to be? I wanted to be a vet, but it was too hard. If you're not a vet by next year, I'll shoot you. Like, is that... Like, Flannery O'Connor ends the story, Good Man, Hard to Find, where he's like, the problem with her is that she didn't have someone pointing a gun at her all the days of her life.
Yep. Oh my gosh, I love O'Connor.
So maybe that's it. Maybe the answer is that. Like, maybe the problem... But that would just mean that the problem is people aren't facing, like, hard enough negativity. Like, in the Tyler Durst Fight Club, like, the negativity of a gun is, like, you can't deny that. Like, there's no rationalization room.
It's not, like... And there's kind of, like, it's hard to not acknowledge the fact that when people, like, like, we're saying war stories, and, like, when people are, like, got Viktor Frankl, it's like, come on now. Like, these people are facing insane stuff. And yet they're, like... There's meaning in life. There's purpose in life. It's just like, and you make it, and you define it, and you rewrite it, and like it's just.
Yeah, but then if we say
wild.
this, it's the theological answer of devastation. Like that's what wakes people up. Kay and Digress are, it's like, what wake up? Where does the wake up come from? The wake up, and theologically the answer is, and this is not just Christianity. This is like all the religions. They're like, it's either beauty or devastation. But then, of course, we already said, like, why do some people respond to devastation and beauty X way, and why do other people do Y way? So there's still a question there. Yeah. But all the religions are going to say that the religions all say that the condition of the chance of grace is beauty or devastation. So that would be, like, then the question is, what is the grace? So, like, the condition of which the grace appears tends to be beauty or devastation. Yes. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
But then, of course, the question that still rises is why does the grace show up and why doesn't it?
Yep.
Christianity is a psychotechnology, says that's not in your hands, so you can't be arrogant or prideful about it.
Yep.
And also, you have to be open to it, and life, at the end of the day, has a giant mystery, and that mystery is good, because if life didn't have a mystery, you might be bored, and life wouldn't have magic and wonder and different things.
Yes.
But that mystery also has to force you as a human being to come to a place where there's a certain, like, gap in your understanding that you have to accept.
Yep.
Like, that's the price.
Yep.
Like, the price for this mechanism of grace that makes life always, like, a mystery and have a potential of wonder and awe and possibility, the price for living in that world is having a gap in your knowledge.
Yep.
And you either integrate with that gap or you don't.
Right.
And the choice is yours.
Yep. Absolutely.
So for Michelle's OG Rose Talk with Cadell, go to the Anchor. And Cadell's great. And
thank you. I'm really thankful for the time I could talk with Cadell about it, and I'm really thankful for the time to talk with you about it, Daniel.
Yes. So
it's a great topic. And yeah, you could just check out Spotify, Anchor, OG Rose, and you can also find more of our work on YouTube and Instagram, Twitter.
OGRose.com.
Yeah, OGRose.com.
Maybe Google. Just go to Google and type in OG Rose. Who knows?
Well, no, don't go to Google. They had their red their alert mode.
Oh yeah,
they might not be there.
Go to OpenAI. Go to Bing. I never thought I'd say go to freaking Bing.
Go to Bing.
Wow. Who knew that day would come? But anyway, thank you very much, everyone.
Yes, thank you so much.